Hi, so I'm making this video in memory of my great uncle and the last generation. Basically, my great uncle, his Hebrew name was Gedalia, but we called him Uncle Danny. And we always knew him as our great uncle, but he was more like a grandfather figure because we didn't really have grandparents. Like my family, we didn't. My parents, their parents died young. Like my mother's father died when she was 18. So she lost her father at a young age, and my and her mother died when she was like 74, and we were very young. So we don't really remember. Like she would come to visit us like once a year or something, and we don't remember her because she lives in South Africa. And my father's father lived in Russia until like almost 20 years ago. He died like almost 20 years ago, maybe 20 years ago by now. Yeah, that makes more sense. Like 20 years ago he died, and he was buried in Russia, and he only came to visit once when like my older sister was a baby. So I never met him. And my father's mother died also at a young age, like she was 64. She had like a heart condition, so my father's mother died. So we didn't really grow up with grandparents, and so at least we had our great uncle, so he was kind of like the patriarch of the family. And so he was born, like he died, and he would be now 94. Today was his funeral. And I want to just say a little bit about him and the like where he comes from and his background and his story, from what I know, from what I heard through the grapevine. So he was born, I'm not sure the year, because he's 94 now, so he must have been born in like the 30s, 1930 or something like that. And he lived in Ukraine with my father's father. He's like my grandfather's father. No, he's my grandfather's brother. So that makes him my uncle. So so they were born and they lived in, I'm not sure if they were born in Russia or they moved. I think they were born in Russia, but in Ukraine. But like my father's side of the family came from Germany. But so they lived in Ukraine, and during the 40s, in 1941, the Germans invaded Ukraine, and they rounded up all the Jews. And apparently, from what I heard through the grapevine, was that my great great grandparents, they didn't trust the Germans because I guess they knew like their side of the family was from Germany, but they felt something had, like, previously the Germans had been very friendly to the Jewish people, but then something changed, and that's when Hitler came into power and everything changed. So my great grandparents didn't really trust they didn't trust the Germans. And so the Germans invaded Ukraine, and they they have their thing. They want to kill all the Jews, right? So they wanted to kill Jews, gypsies, anyone who wasn't like them, but mainly Jews. So basically they put up a sign. The Germans invaded Ukraine, and they put up a sign that said, here, I'll read it to you. Of course it was in Russian and German, and they called Jews Yids. Like Jews are called in Yiddish Yid, like Yidden, Juden. Like that's how the Germans would speak about the Jews, like Yidden, Yid, Yidden. So it says, all Yids of the city of Kiev and its vicinity must appear on Monday 29th of September by 8 o'clock in the morning at the corner of Melnikova and Doktorivskaya streets near Viskov Cemetery. Bring documents, money and valuables, and also warm clothing, linen, etc., any Yids who do not follow this order, like any Jews who do not follow this order and are found elsewhere, will be shot. Any civilians who enter the dwellings left by Yids and appropriate the things in them will be shot. So they're saying they wanted, so they basically, they put the signs up, and the reason why so many Jews and got murdered by the Nazis with this was because it was like a campaign. They like lied to the Jewish people that they're just going to be relocated and given jobs or whatever, but and also they had the help of the ordinary citizens of Ukraine that helped turn in the Jews that were hiding. So it was really no win-win situation. So the Germans expected only 6,000 Jews to come to Babi Yar, but the Jews, many more showed up, and they were all they were rounded into this square called the Babi Yar. Babi means in Russian like grandma, and it means a vine, grandma's vine, or something like that. So what happened? So then on the 29th of 30th September 1941, the Nazis and their collaborators murdered approximately 33,000 Jewish civilians at Babi Yar. The order to kill the Jews of Kiev was given to the commander and some Ukrainian soldiers as well. And the Ukrainian police supported the Nazis also with this, and the local collaborators, like the civilians, were helping as well, and they also guarded the outside of the execution site where they wanted to kill all the Jews. So they didn't realize that there would be so many Jews coming to get killed, because the Jews didn't know. They just thought they're going to be relocated. So they didn't know they're going to be exterminated. So the difficulties resulting from such a large-scale action of murdering all the Jews, in particular concerning the seizure, were overcome in Kiev by requesting the Jewish population through wall posters to move. Although only a participation of 5,000 to 6,000 Jews had been expected at first, more than 30,000 Jews showed up. Until the very moment of their execution, they still believed in their resettlement, that they're going to be moved, thanks to extremely clever organization. According to the testimony of a truck driver named Hofer, victims were ordered to undress and were beaten if they resisted. I watched what happened when the Jews, men, women, and children arrived. The Ukrainians led them past a number of different places where one after the other they had to give up their luggage, then their coats, then their shoes and overgarments, and also underwear. They also had to leave their valuables in a designated place. There was a special pile for each article of clothing. It all happened very quickly, and anyone who hesitated was kicked or pushed by the Ukrainians to keep them moving. The crowd was very large enough that most of the victims could not have known what was happening until it was too late. By the time they heard the machine gun fire, there was no chance to escape. All were driven down a corridor of soldiers in groups of 10, and then shot. So basically, there was like soldiers standing here and here, like making like a hallway. So the Jews would be walking in the middle, and then they would get shot. Once undressed, they were led into the ravine, which was about 150 meters long and 30 meters wide, and a good 15 meters deep. When they reached the bottom of the ravine, I don't know how to say this, they were seized by members of the Schutzpolizei and made to lie down on top of Jews who had already been shot. The corpses were literally in layers, and a police marksman came along and shot each Jew in the neck with a submachine gun. I saw these marksmen stand on layers of corpses and shoot one after the other. The marksmen would walk across the bodies of the executed Jews to the next Jew, so they were walking on top of the bodies, who had meanwhile lain down and shoot him. In the evening, the Germans undermined the wall of the ravine, and buried the people under the thick layer of earth. According to the Eisengruppe's Operation Situation Report, 33,000 Jews were shot in the suburbs were shot systematically by machine gun fire at Babi Yar on 29th and 30th September 1941. So my uncle would have been, like, him and his family were there, and he would have been there, and, you know, he would have been 10 years old. The money, valuables, and underwear and clothing of the murdered were turned over to the local ethnic Germans and to the Nazi administration of the city. Wounded victims were buried alive in the ravine along with the rest of the bodies. In months that followed, thousands more Jews were seized and killed there and shot. So basically, like 100,000 Jews were basically shot there. One second. Yeah. The Germans undermined the wall. Okay. Until the Soviet liberation in 1943. So, like, I wish I knew the story better, like, about my grandfather and my uncle, you know, because they were there at this time and they somehow dodged it. So they're, like, basically Holocaust survivors. So basically they killed over 100,000 in the end. Upon the Soviet liberation of Kiev in 1943, Soviet officials led Western journalists to the site of the massacres and allowed them to interview survivors and take pictures. However, there was even more incredible actions by the Nazis. Wilke said that in the middle of August, the SS mobilized a party of 100 Russian war prisoners who were taken to the ravines on August 19. These men were ordered to disinter all the bodies in the ravine. The Germans, because they basically didn't want to leave any evidence of their crime. The Germans, meanwhile, took a party to a nearby Jewish cemetery, whence marble headstones were brought to Babi Yar Sik to form the foundation of a huge funeral pyre. Atop the stones were piled a layer of wood and then a layer of bodies, and so on until the pyre was as high as a 2-story house. Wilke said that approximately 1,500 bodies were burned in each operation of the furnace, and each funeral pyre took 2 nights and 1 day to burn completely. The cremation went on for 40 days, and then the prisoners, who by this time included 341 men, were ordered to build another furnace. Since this was the last furnace and there were no more bodies, the prisoners realized it was for them. They made a break, but only a dozen out of more than 200 survived the bullets of the Nazi machine guns. Wow. Yeah, so basically, as story has it, my grandfather's and my great uncle's parents told my uncle, if I remember correct, and my grandfather to go and on the rooftops to see what was happening with the Jews that were being rounded up. So they didn't trust the Germans that invaded, so they hid away. And basically, my great uncle witnessed the massacre of a lot of the massacre, you know. So he's like traumatized, you know. And my grandfather, so that like made him into like a very serious person, you know, if he sees such a thing and survives such a thing and living in fear. And so that was called the Massacre of Babi Yar. And so another interesting story about my great uncle. You know, another weird thing was that, like, last year or 2 years ago, a few years ago, my uncle, like, he felt like he's gonna die soon, so he had a little bit of money that he'd save up. He was like a very hard worker. He would never ask anyone for money. He always had like a lot of jobs. Like, even when he moved to America and he didn't really have the proper papers, not papers, but he had the papers, but he didn't have the I guess he couldn't use his degrees, whatever he had from Russia, to work here or whatever. So he would have like 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and he would do any kind of job. Like he wasn't I mean, I don't quite remember. Like, did he actually have a job, like an engineering job here? you know. So he might have had like an engineering job in New York, but he was a very hard worker, and you know, he was a very honorable man. And like 3 years ago, he felt like he was gonna go, you know, so he started giving all the great nieces and nephews um like his money while he's still alive, you know. I bought this computer that right here I bought with his money, and and like every time Hanukkah would come around or any holiday, like he was always there, and he would give us Hanukkah geld, which means like Hanukkah money. And it was just always a nice experience, you know, having him as the grandpa, you know. Yeah, like I remember, like we didn't know each other's language. Like he knew Yiddish and Russian. He learned Yiddish especially to communicate with us, but because my family were not traditionally like my parents are Baal Tshuva, they became religious, so we never really caught on to Yiddish, like from the community or from school, you know. So we didn't know Yiddish, and we didn't know Russian, and my uncle didn't know English, so it was a bit hard to communicate with him. And another legend about my uncle is that, you know, he was single for some time, I guess, in Kiev, Russia, Ukraine, Kharkov, I don't know where. I think it was Kharkov. And you know, he had like the way it works in Russia is that they have like apartment complexes, I'm guessing, and there was like a my cat. Let me go open the door for my cat. So there was like he's crying outside my door. So there was like this police guy. It's very common in the Russian tradition, like the Russian non-Jews. It's very common for them to get drunk. You know, they would spend all their money on like. They would spend all their money on. They would spend it all on how do you say? Ooh, yikes! How do I do this? You know, I'll continue in the next video. Okay.